The sound of the front door clicking open was a welcome reprieve from the suffocating silence that had settled over our home like an oppressive fog. Natalie was back from her book club, and even from the hallway, I could hear an unusual lilt in her voice, a melody I hadn't heard in months. She breezed into the living room, her radiant smile illuminating her face like she had just stumbled upon some grand discovery. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkled with something electric, and she seemed younger somehow, almost weightless. She'd always enjoyed her book club, but tonight was different. There was a vibrancy about her that made my gut twist into a tight, painful knot. "Hey, babe," she chirped, leaning in for a quick peck on the cheek. Her skin smelled of vanilla and something else, a musky undertone I didn't recognize. "We had such a great discussion tonight. You wouldn't believe it. We actually stayed an extra hour." I forced a smile, willing myself to push down the gnawing suspicion that had begun to creep into my chest. "Sounds fun," I said, though my voice came out flat, even to my own ears. She pulled a slim paperback from her tote bag and placed it on the coffee table. The cover depicted a woman staring longingly into a sunset, a trashy romance novel, not the intellectual literature she usually devoured. "Oh, it's just a light read," she said dismissively, waving a hand. "Just a bit of escapism, you know? Don't bother with it, though. It's really not your thing." She hummed softly as she flitted into the kitchen, leaving me alone with the book and the unsettling weight pressing against my ribs. Something about her tone, her energy, felt off, too rehearsed, too deliberately casual. As if drawn by an invisible force, my fingers closed around the book's flimsy cover, the cheap paper rough against my skin. I flipped it open, expecting to find her usual annotations, little scribbles of thoughts scrawled in the margins. But instead, something else slipped free, a folded piece of paper, tucked carefully between the pages. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It wasn't a note about the book. It was a letter, the kind filled with whispered promises and illicit desires. Each line dripped with a passion that had long since faded from our marriage. "My dearest Natalie," it began. The handwriting was unmistakably masculine. "The thought of you tonight kept me from sleeping. Your laughter, the way you looked at me. I can't wait for our next escape." The words struck like hammer blows against my chest. They spoke of stolen glances, of secrets shared in hushed voices, of a rendezvous planned at a secluded cabin. The very same weekend she had claimed she'd be visiting her sister. The air in the room thickened, heavy with the weight of betrayal. The vibrant colors around me dulled to a lifeless gray as the truth settled over me like a crushing weight. Natalie, the woman I had loved and trusted for 10 years, was having an affair. The breath left my lungs in a ragged exhale. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to break something. The letter shook in my grip as my eyes landed on a name, scrawled near the bottom. James. It burned itself into my memory, branding my soul with searing clarity. That night, I said nothing. I forced a smile, played my part, and went through our usual routine, dinner, a couple of episodes of some forgettable TV show, her leaning in with false affection to kiss me goodnight. I saw it then in her eyes. A lie wrapped in tenderness. And in that moment, I knew. I wouldn't let this pass. Over the next few days, I perfected the art of deception. I became the oblivious husband, nodding along to her stories while quietly piecing together the puzzle of her treachery. I found James on social media, a smug-looking man in his late 30s with carefully cultivated charm. An architect, his profiles dripped with success and quiet arrogance. I found his office, his home, the places he frequented. I learned his routine. The more I discovered, the colder my rage became. It wasn't a fiery, reckless anger, but something more chilling, more methodical. I also found the cabin, the one they planned to escape to. That weekend, I told Natalie I'd be working overtime. In reality, I spent my time preparing, packing, planning. I bought a cheap GoPro to capture everything I needed. Every detail had to be perfect. By Friday afternoon, I was already at the cabin. I let myself in with a key I had lifted from Natalie's purse while she slept. The place was rustic, secluded, pathetic. It was no wonder she had been so giddy lately. This was probably the only attention she'd received in months. I set up my hidden cameras and waited. They arrived late, close to 10 p.m., their laughter spilling into the night as they carried in bags of groceries, moving with the ease of lovers who believed themselves untouchable. Through the camera lens, I watched them, my resolve hardening with every stolen glance, every whispered touch. I gave them an hour. Let them settle in. Let them bask in the illusion of safety. Then I made my move. The door crashed open beneath the force of my kick, the wood splintering around the lock. The laughter died in their throats. Natalie went pale, her hand flying to her mouth, eyes wide with terror. James took a step back, his confidence flickering, then vanishing entirely as he saw my face. "Surprise," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Looks like you two were having a good time." James straightened, trying to summon some bravado. "Who the hell are you? Get out of here." I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked onto Natalie, drinking in the fear that had finally shifted in my direction. I took a slow step forward, then another. "I just wanted to have a chat," I murmured, pulling the letter from my pocket and holding it up between two fingers. "About the book club." I let it fall at her feet. Then I turned to James. "And you, Mr. Architect. You've been building things that don't belong to you." His jaw tightened. "Listen, man, this is between us. She wasn't happy. So she found someone who. That was all I needed." I lunged. The fight was fast, brutal, fueled by months, years, of quiet resentment and betrayal. Each punch landed with the sharp, satisfying crunch of bone against flesh. James tried to fight back, but he was no match for the cold fury that coursed through my veins. Natalie screamed, but I barely heard her. When I finally stepped back, James was on the floor, moaning, blood smeared across his swollen face. I turned to Natalie. She was a crumpled mess of tears, her hands trembling. "You're the most pathetic person I've ever met," I told her, voice hollow. "I could have forgiven a mistake. But the planning? The lies? You're an evil person." She had no words. I left them there, in the wreckage of their affair, taking with me the footage, the letter, the truth. By morning, the world knew. Their workplaces. Their families. Their friends. James's career crumbled. His reputation shattered. His life unraveled in a storm of whispers and disgrace. Natalie fared no better. She lost everything, her job, her friends, even her family's support. And me? I walked away. I never looked back. And for the first time in years, I was truly at peace.